So good afternoon, everyone. I am Angelique, working from Randstad Sourceright. Welcome to our Talent Navigator series. Today, we are going to talk about how to build a sustainable remote workforce. So for your information, this event will be recorded. If you got any question during the session, feel free to pop them into the chat box. We will answer them during the session or at the end of the session. So welcome to David Vincent, our host today, and to Russell Beck, our guest speaker. So now, David, the floor is yours. I'll let you introduce everyone.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Angelique, and welcome everybody. I'm David Vincent. I am Managing Director for Randstad Sourceright, based here in the UK. I'm sat, ironically, actually in the office in London today, bearing in mind we're talking about remote working, but there we go. We're moving offices tomorrow, so everybody's in here packing up today, so it's quite exciting. I'm joined by Russell, Russell Beck. Russell's probably got one of the coolest job titles I think I've seen, Director of Inspiration. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Russell, and let you do a bit of an intro.
Thank you, David, and hi everyone. I hope you're keeping well and safe. My name is Russell Beck. I work for Imagine Think Do, which is a people strategy consultancy, and our purpose is to inspire, challenge and enable leaders and organizations to unlock the potential and productivity of your people. We mostly work with management teams, executive teams, helping leaders face into people challenges, aligning purpose, looking at values and culture, team dysfunction or over-making high-performing teams, looking at where the future of work is going. And so really looking forward to hopefully sharing some things with you today, give you some pointers on making remote work strategic.
Good stuff. You're very welcome, Russell. So thank you for joining us. Looking forward to the conversation. I think, as one of the comments says already, it's a really relevant topic actually at the moment. I think it's front of mind for an awful lot of people. But I guess, interestingly, I guess in terms of first questions, Russell, is we're talking about this being strategic, but we've been doing it now for nearly 18 months or so. So do you not think we're doing it strategically already? We're already working remotely strategically? Do you think that's already happened or not?
Good question. I think we've been remote working for 18 months. It's almost exactly, well, to the day actually, for 18 months since the first UK lockdown. Obviously different dates, different jurisdictions, but that kind of time frame. Before the pandemic, if you can cast your mind back that way, 70% of workers had tried working from home, but that was typically time bound, a day or two a week. Pre-pandemic, only 6% of the UK working population was fully 5 days a week at home. But overnight, everyone did it. That figure leapt to 50, 60, 70%. And the interesting thing is we've been living through a crisis-induced response to a pandemic. Working from home has lots and lots of benefits. Homeschooling, for any of you with children, isn't one of them. And the past 18 months gave us all the challenges of remote working, pivoting overnight, but very few of the benefits that remote working has.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think, if we all roll back to kind of March last year, I think I remember standing in here and saying to people, you need to take your laptop home because we're probably not going to be in the office for the next week or so. And, here we are. I think we've probably got more people in today than we've seen certainly in the last 18 months. So it was an incredible change overnight, as you say. So I guess just looking at the benefits, I think everybody's had different experiences of working remotely, haven't they? And I think there's no doubt that it's brought benefits to individuals and to organisations actually. But what's your view on that, Russell? What do you think are the kind of key benefits of remote working?
I think there's lots of research during the pandemic with remote working as to does it make us more productive or less productive? Delete is applicable and so forth. I think even if you look pre-pandemic, would you possibly say it's more normal times? The benefit for us as individuals is relatively easy. It's an ability to integrate our personal and professional lives together so that both benefit. We want to lead interesting lives. We want to lead meaningful lives. We want our time at work to support life and family goals. And flexibility, remote work ensures people like their work and see it as something that benefits family rather than detracting from it.
Yeah.
For both parties, you open up a much bigger pool of opportunity. I can work with customers in, and have done, in Amsterdam. I've had a big project in Ireland. We've got stuff in America, APAC and so forth. Fantastic. I've got that flexibility to be able to do that. And companies can engage workers with no restriction to geography or potentially even time zones. And also for organizations, research from the likes of AstraZeneca, Deloitte, Corporate Leadership Council and so on showed that commitment scores of employees are about a third higher if they have the flexibility they want. And that gain in commitment translated to about a 7% increase in productivity and performance. And I guess the final one in terms of benefit to organizations is retention. Pre-pandemic, Deloitte quantified a figure of $41 million annually. But giving workers flexibility, that flexibility resulted in a tangible, and they're accountants, so they can probably work it out. They put 41 million on it. So really, it's a win-win from pretty much every angle.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly it flips, because we're definitely seeing now candidates are increasingly saying that if there's not flexibility built into the role, they're not even interested in looking at it actually, which is an incredible step, I think, in a relatively short period of time. But I guess so, if we ended up all working remotely purely in reaction to the pandemic, okay, and touch wood, we're beginning to come out of the other side of that now. Do you not see that to a degree we'll start returning to normal and people will start going back into the office? Do you not think that that remote working was a reaction to the pandemic, and as that subsides, we'll get back to what we were doing before?
I think, as with all things in life, yes and no. I'm going to sit on the fence a little. And I think you've started to hint at the challenges ahead. We're seeing, it came from the US, and I think the US economy broadly is 3 or so months ahead of the UK and ahead of Europe and so forth. The great resignation is upon us. And for brevity and simplicity, you're seeing the data say that great resignation is caused by two things. One is pay, the power, the control, the demands has shifted from organizations, capital to labor. You're seeing certainly in the UK wage inflation running at 7.4% annually. So pay is one thing driving the resignations, and the second is a demand. And I say demand is fair enough for flexibility. In the UK today, ONS data as of last week, there are over 1 million vacancies in the UK today, all-time high. It's never been that busy and so forth. In France, 285,000 vacancies. Now that's down from the peak, which was only last month, but it's still 4 times higher than the number of vacancies in April 2020. German vacancies, 780,000, and a recent high. If you Google the phrase workers want flexibility, pick a random set of words around those three, you'll get various reports that say 75, 90, 66% of workers want some degree of flexibility. The interesting thing in that is McKinsey last week came out and said almost 70% of executives say they have no detailed plan in place on the horizon for hybrid work. So the challenge is, the genie's out the bottle. We've been remote working to degrees. It is now therefore no longer a nice to have, but almost, as you hinted, a non-negotiable. And in a seller's market, you might not have much choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because again, I think everybody's adopted some kind of hybrid setup, haven't they? I don't think there's probably any organisation, well, maybe a few, but they're working in the same kind of pattern that they were before. But I think you're right. I think a lot of that has just happened, through the reaction to what's happened, rather than actually a plan being put in place to kind of look at it strategically and kind of think about, what's the best way forward with that. So I guess just staying on that theme, as we do start to unlock, and the remote working is here to stay. How do we embrace that? And how do we make the most of that? How do we get the benefit from that?
I think your point is well made. Is it almost happened organically?
Yeah, exactly that.
For the last 18 months, reactionary more than anything, and that's in a crisis. That's fair enough. If you look at Kinevin, that's one of the best ways to make decisions. But now we're starting to get to a more steady state of normalcy. And so now we need to think about making it strategic, make it conscious, make considered decisions. We've reacted, but we now need to think through measures to ensure equality and equity, that there's fairness in who and how, in that no one feels excluded, in that both parties feel they get what they want from the relationship. And at the same time, as employers, we have a duty of care and a duty of care to all of our employees. So how do we show that we are caring for all people, no matter how, where, or indeed when they work? There's different types of work we do. Sometimes some work requires concentrated thinking. Some work requires collaboration. And it's only by embracing that realization and that understanding, that hybridization, that we get the benefits. And I think it's interesting from LinkedIn, if you look at LinkedIn today, tomorrow, yesterday, whatever, there's lots and lots of pictures, quite rightly so, of people really happy to be back in the office. It's the first time I've been in the office. Look, I'm in a room, there's people, there's wow, I'm at a desk. Have you seen a desk before? That kind of thing. People are really almost euphoric. It's first day back in the office for the entire country kind of thing.
It's exactly what it's been like here today. It's a number of people that this is their first time back in for a long time, and you can absolutely feel the buzz. It's really interesting.
But I think equally and that's absolutely right. Equally, I suggest that give it 4 weeks, and we'll remember that offices were in effect an interruption factory.
Yeah.
Open plan offices were designed to enhance collaboration. They don't. All the research shows that open plan offices increase communication, but it's electronic communication, not verbal or physical communication. And so there's this thinking carefully about it. No one is going to want to travel in on a train to sit at a desk, stick their headphones on and work there for 8 hours and turn around and go home again.
Yeah.
Did it at home. Why am I doing it here? Equally, therefore, the onus is on managers to almost, if they're bringing people into the office, to make that time in the office collaborative and not doing individual work, which the person could equally do as well at home, because otherwise you will create resentment.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I was talking to a client last week, and she was actually sat in an office environment at the time. But she said, look, it's interesting. I've come back into the office, and I'm trying to find somewhere really quiet so I can sit and do some kind of strategic thinking. She said, I'm really finding it difficult. I've been working from home for the last 12 months, and I can go and sit in my room and it's really quiet. And now I'm here, and there's a buzz and it's really nice, but I'm really struggling to concentrate on doing what I'm doing. It's interesting dilemmas, isn't it?
This is just slightly cypher, but if in an open plan office, if you're standing almost by the walkway where people go down, you find yourself always doing this, like a meerkat doing that. And that's actually your fight or flight response in your brain going on, because you're seeing movement in the corner of your eye, and your brain is literally going, is that a saber-toothed tiger coming to get me? And then, oh no, it's just David walking past, getting another coffee, kind of thing. And it's those distractions that we haven't. It takes, I think it takes 30 days for something to become a habit. That's how we work, how we're wired, and so forth. We've been at home, and your example, your customer has been at home, and over 30 days has lost that habit of things distracting her. Now, therefore, you'll be in a sensory overload situation when you're in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly right. Exactly. And I think interested to get your view on this, but we did a meeting actually in this room last week, and I was sat in the boardroom here with a couple of other colleagues, and then we had a number of people who actually sat at home. So we had the camera on the main TV screen, and there were 4 of us here, and there are 4 or so people based at home, and that's a really odd kind of setup, having been used to everybody having their own laptop sat in front of their own camera, and everybody's got their own little piece of screen, to suddenly be in an environment where you've got some people in the office and some people out. There's a real kind of, I don't know, it felt like there was a delineation between the 2 groups. But are you seeing that elsewhere in other people you're talking to, Russell?
I see a lot of, I think the phrase I'm hearing is remote first.
Okay.
And I think you've hit on a really good point, and it ties in with what I was saying earlier in terms of, duty of care. We need to ensure equality and equity.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic, we have all suffered from those webinars, those conference calls, where some poor person has dialed in, hello, can you hear me? And if they don't feel excluded during one of those, then they have got skin far, far, far thicker than an elephant, kind of thing. I think what the pandemic has taught us is, we can work remotely, but as people return to the office, what is your strategy? And I think this is the important thing. How are you going to deal with this? Because if you do it piecemeal, you'll have different managers agreeing to different things. And within a week, you'll have 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 different strategies. And it will be like, well, what about them over there? And that's where it starts to unravel on so many different levels, expenses and so forth. But I know a lot of companies, and certainly in the tech space predominantly, are going remote first. And their approach is, if anyone is dialing in, everyone dials in, because that is equitable. We are now in the same place. Because if we're dialing in, you see me this big on the screen. I can see you big on the screen. I can see how things are landing. I can see you nodding and all that stuff that we've all grown used to over the last 18 months. Yep. If, however, I'm in a meeting room, and my room isn't big enough because I'm standing here, but I'm kind of over here, or even worse, slightly off screen.
Yeah.
And how's anyone not in the room meant to manage that?
Exactly right. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, clearly, there's no benefit from you're not going to maximise the benefit from the team doing that. Certainly, that's for sure. So I guess I think what I'm hearing from you is that we need to make sure we're not doing this piecemeal. We've got to have a plan around it and so on and so forth. So I'm interested to kind of get your view in terms of perhaps what that plan should look like, and accepting that it's probably going to be different for different people. But I just want to go back to one point that you made a moment ago when you mentioned expenses. Yeah. Okay. Which, for me, we work in a situation where we've got people based in London, people based in Manchester, and so on and so forth. And there was an acceptance in the past that perhaps London wages attracted slightly more than perhaps somebody in Scotland, for example. That all of those lines and those parameters are becoming really, really blurred now, because quite often we're going to hire people that might be based in Scotland, North England, France, Germany, wherever it might be, to do a role which would have traditionally been based here in London. So how do you manage that kind of discrepancy around salaries and so on and so forth. I mean, it's a bit of a gnarly one, I think.
And if there was an easy answer, we probably wouldn't be discussing it. Yeah. And I think
paper.
yeah, I think you can add to this question actually expenses and benefits, because they tend to be almost the flip side of the coin. What are you giving and what are you allowing people to claim for? Yeah. I think both will need to be rethought from first principles. On the expenses side, you've got, not everyone's home environment might be conducive to working effectively remotely.
Yeah.
Lots of research that says we need to have a delineated space between office and home. And I'm fortunate enough, my house enables me to have an office and I can shut the door, job done. That's not true for everyone. So if you're having remote workers, last 18 months, and it goes back to that reaction, anywhere would do, dining room table, kitchen chair, the bed. But do you now insist on a working place? And for the wellness of that individual, do you insist it is delineated? If that is not possible, do you insist on a networking space? One of the re-engineerings of town centres and so forth, there's hubs, networking spaces, rent a desk for a week. Is that what you insist on? So whilst they can be remote from you, they still get that office environment, but equally for them, human connection, even if it isn't with colleagues in their own organisation. So that's another wellness side of things coming out in there. The office environment has many perks. For a lot of businesses, the office itself was a benefit. Free coffee, maybe even barista style coffee.
You've not been to our office, Russell, I can tell.
Next time I come in, I remember to go to Costa first. But food at meetings. So your remote meetings, and you might have Pret sandwiches or whatever. Do remote workers get a delivery of food? Do they get a subscription to Nespresso pods or tea pigs? Luncheon vouchers. And a fascinating one would be, as people went into lockdown, they may have found their home environment not conducive to working. So actually, they relocated from a studio flat in London to their parents' place in Manchester. They relocated from Paris to Grenoble. They relocated from Berlin to their parents in Heidelberg or something. Absolutely appropriate. And now they're there. They've given up their rented accommodation.
Yeah.
Where am I going to live now? Where's my contract? And who pays for my travel and the hotel accommodation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma, and it's going to be, that's going to be prevalent. I've no doubt about that whatsoever.
It needs to be thought. It needs to be thought through, because otherwise you will have different hiring managers, different managers doing different things.
Yeah, exactly that.
It's this equity, and so it almost. You hinted at it earlier. Actually, it made me think. Some companies, GitHub is very good at this, and actually, if you do some research on GitHub, one thing I like about GitHub is they're very transparent about everything they do. They are remote first.
Yep.
They've gone 100% remote, so you can see what they're doing, but they also release what they're doing. There's if you've seen Coursera, great platform for learning and development. GitHub have a 10-hour course on there on remote working. Well worth doing, but they consciously document everything, and they say that might sound excessive. It might sound like, why are we wasting our time to document everything? But actually, it's conscious, because then there's a single source of truth. It defines who they are, how they want to be, defines their culture to an extent. They say it's sneakily vital to run a good business because it's documented. There it is. Conversely, it you get flavors, you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
a bit of chaos, a bit of confusion that then over time amplifies. And it's this being clear about expectations, I think, is critical in all of it. And actually, I mean, you can almost say that this is distilling culture, and there are no good or bad cultures. It's just the culture. But being crystal clear about what it is really important.
Do you think there's going to be a need to kind of, to a degree, reset some expectations? Because you made me think there when you were referencing earlier, kind of, we've become accepting of, the dog barking in the background, or somebody running in and out of shot, and so on and so forth. Do you think we should retain that kind of level of acceptance, or do you think now is the time to say, look, if we're going to start working remotely, we need to press the reset button here to a degree and start thinking about, if we're doing a presentation to a client or we're speaking to a senior member of the team, there's got to be certain parameters that we work within. What's your view on that?
I think you're right. During lockdowns, as I said, homeschooling was not a benefit, and we all suffered from it. So I think there's a famous example. The current CEO of Uber, during his interview, when he took over from Dennis, his child ran in with half naked with an ice cream, going, "Daddy, Daddy, do you want this?" And he's presenting to the board of Uber. So children interrupted us pre-pandemic, and there's obviously the famous example of the reporter on Korea on the BBC News and so forth. On one level, that personalizes us. On one level, we learn more about people. That helps build trust because we understand, we see their environment, and so on and so forth. I think there's this being clear of expectations again, I think, is really important. I think the example of, do you require, dictate, expect a delineated work home zone? One thing. I know one company that's saying, if you want to work from home and you have children, I want to see evidence of childcare arrangements.
Yeah.
So I want to know, whilst during the pandemic, and this is again the same thing. During the pandemic, we juggled everything. We had to juggle childcare because we couldn't outsource that anywhere. It's different now. So I want to see evidence. Working is working. So show me the evidence that you have childcare arrangements in place whilst you are working for me and I'm paying you.
Yeah.
So I think there is that level of, and again, it's that understanding and appreciation. And I think it's this clarity, having this transparency and clarity is important on a couple of levels. Not all roles can be done 100% remotely. That's fine. Not all roles can be done 100% in the office. Equally fine. But where's the clarity in this?
Yeah,
and that clarity is really important. One of the old mantras back in the day when we're in the office and someone packs up because they're on a flexible arrangement or whatever and leaves at 4:30 to pick up the children. Yeah, fine. I'd put my mortgage on the fact that some smart aleck in that walk of shame to the lift or the door would go, "Oh, half day." The fact that person's going to be working on the train on the way home doing emails or working tonight has completely missed them by.
Yeah.
So what is the expectation of the role and defining that? And actually, it doesn't matter what it is. I know companies who are saying 100% in the office, we don't care. It's office based. That's it. Fine. You know where you stand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's when it's not defined, it's when there's ambiguity and it breeds resentment. So if you define a role as being 50-50, at least colleagues know that.
Yeah.
And therefore they're not expecting to see you in the office every day.
No, absolutely right. Yeah. So it's kind of setting that expectation. So everybody's clear where they're standing and so on. Okay. That's useful. Can we talk a bit around, and we've done a lot of this, but I'm interested in your view. But clearly, we've hired an awful lot of people purely remotely, and listening to the conversation today, even here, there's a number of people who have started in our business in the last kind of 18 months or so, and they've never met anybody in person. And I think that's certainly been the same for many of our clients. We've hired lots and lots of people over the last 18 months, and they've not been to the environment, they've not met their team, not met their hiring manager. What's your view in terms of, I guess, what's best practice around one, doing that hiring piece, but more importantly, how do you integrate someone who hasn't seen what the office looks like, hasn't met anybody, and so
on? That's two questions: hiring and integration. If I pick the hiring one first, I think even when we could meet people, hiring the right, whatever that means for you, hiring the right person was almost hard enough.
Yep.
I think there's some interesting discussions around how do you ensure the integrity of the hiring process if you're hiring remotely. I could Alt-Tab into Chrome or Edge or your internet access point of choice and Google questions, Google answers whilst I'm talking to you, and so forth. How do you ensure that people who take tests, whatever, if you use situation judgments, verbal, numerical, whatever those are, it doesn't matter. How do you actually know who takes the thing? So there's some interesting questions about the integrity of the hiring process and ensuring how that is managed. I could be sitting here, I'm not, by the way, I could be sitting here and have loads of post-it notes of all my notes here.
Yeah.
You can't see it. It's marvelous. I think integrating people is really, really interesting. And I think take a step outside of whether it's remote or not, actually, because I think we don't often get it really well done. If you think, whenever we buy a product, anything, we to get the most out of it, we use it and treat it in a different way.
Yep.
I don't treat my car like I treat, something. We treat products in different ways because they're suitable for a defined purpose. Now, come to a shop, news alert. People are all different. So no two workers are identical.
Yeah. And
they like different things. They operate in different ways. So right up front, I would, after you've made an offer to someone, and I stress after, so it's not seen as part of the selection or hiring process, but after you've hired them, ask them to write their user manual. How do you like to work? How do you like to be managed? How do you like to receive feedback? How do you like to communicate?
Yeah.
What's your interests? What makes you special? What makes you unique? What's your favorite snack bar? What's your favorite drink? You can, however long you want to make it. And it's your way of actually understanding that person and integrating them. So if you know they like running, connect them with someone else who likes running in your business. Now, if you're working remotely, they may never meet, but they can talk about it. They can bond. You build connections. You build, therefore, belonging, which creates inclusion, which ironically drives your diversity.
Absolutely.
If you're asking the remote workers how they like to communicate, how they like to receive feedback, and so forth, it gives you how to manage them. They're helping you.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah,
I would do that for every worker. I wouldn't do it for just remote workers. I think that should be an integral part of every hiring process. And another one, actually, and I think you could retro do that for all your existing workers, because why wouldn't you? Because we've changed. One thing is certain, over the last 18 months, we've changed. And another idea for new employees to help them integrate is assign each one a culture buddy. So an independent person, and by that I mean probably one outside of your team, so they're not seen as a peer and therefore competitive or whatever, and outside of HR, because again, you don't want, you want to have a free and open conversation. You don't want to feel like it's influencing your personal record or whatever. So assign somebody one. So find some people in your business who understand your business, how you're structured, how things are done around here, who's who, what's going on, and so on, all of this, and assign each new hire one of those culture buddies. And at the end of the first week, first month, first quarter, whatever, the culture buddy can sit down, remotely or not, with the new hire. And just, how's it going?
Yeah, that's a nice idea. It's a nice idea. So I guess that we've hired the person, we've got them in. You know, they kind of they've got their culture buddy. But in terms of, you know, from a management perspective and an ongoing kind of management of a remote workforce, it's very different managing people who are remote than someone that you're sat next to in the office. So from a you know, a management perspective, what changes do you see there? You know, is that something that people need to invest in to train people up to help manage people remotely? What's your view on that?
Short answer, yes. Anyway, next. Yes, and I think it's on different levels, both strategic and tactical, as all of this is. So I think with all good management and leaders, etc., is being clear about your expectations. You know, what are we here to do? What does good look like? What are my expectations of you? Forgive me, David. You know, what do I need you to get done so neither of us get fired on Friday? And all too often, certainly pre-pandemic, it was something like, and this is Harvard Business Review, it's something like a third of workers pre-pandemic could not focus because they did not have sufficient guidance from above, something like that.
Yeah.
And remote makes it harder. Of course it does. Exacerbating that is the communication channels. You know, technology is amazing. I mean, we couldn't be running this without technology, but the communication channels that come with technology make it an absolute nightmare. You know, we have email, fine. We have video calls, great. We've got WhatsApp, we've got text messages, we've got Slack, we've got it's like, whoa, yeah. How do we get any work done? And I think there needs definition, clarity on the expectations of the channels that are used.
Yeah.
One of these things about wellness and duty of care, you know, there's this perceived need of individuals to check their emails.
Yeah, absolutely right.
That's it's perceived. I emphasize the word perceived because I'm sure no one expects it, but maybe we need to be clear on, actually, if I communicate by WhatsApp, I expect an answer now. If I do it by email, I don't expect an answer tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Define clarity, because then I know what's going on.
Yeah.
And interestingly, companies like Daimler, Volkswagen, and so forth, and in France, they have policies where if the worker is on holiday, no emails. Now, it can't be beyond the wit of Microsoft or Exchange servers or whatever, that if I'm in work, whatever that means, send me the emails.
Yeah.
If I'm not in work, then hold it in the server, because you, David, might want to send a mail at 10 o'clock at night. That's your bag. I don't, whatever. But I don't receive it till I log on.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that's definitely, you know, that's one of the things which I think has definitely got blurred with the remote working, where, you know, as you said, people are quite often sat in their kitchen or whatever working. They're not really getting away from their laptop or their iPhone or their iPad. So when the emails are coming in late, there is this kind of sense that they should be logging on it and checking. They haven't got that kind of that physical break, which kind of helps them detach and work mentally, which is interesting. I mean, I try and encourage our team to make sure that if we're emailing the team, that we schedule send it. If we're doing it after hours, it goes in the morning and so on. But you know, do we all do that all of the time? No, we don't. No, I don't. So, but you're right. It's that clarity piece, which I think is interesting, because what you've talked about there is clearly defining what's expected of people and what the output is in terms of, you know, what makes them successful in their work, and, you know, what are the expectations in terms of what they should deliver. I mean, that's actually just good management, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Yeah. And it's, I guess, you know, we need to take that to the next level because we're doing that remotely now.
And, you know, entwined in that is trust.
Yeah.
It was fascinating last year, lockdowns, where you saw reports of businesses, yeah, they're working from home, but we're going to check they're actually working every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, that's how they want to be, I guess. But that's, if you can't trust your employees to do a job, then actually, and doing that job might be speaking to clients, it might be, in your case, speaking to candidates, it might be collecting money, it might be designing, it doesn't matter what the job is, but if you can't trust them to do the job, then actually, why are they working for you?
Yeah.
I remember, actually, I was speaking at a conference in Dublin, and the speaker after me was head of L&D for Facebook Europe. And he described his hiring process. He wanted flexibility, birth of first child, and he wanted to work from home 2 days a week. And he said the interviewers at Facebook were looking really confused. What are you asking for? I want to work from home 2 days a week. What's the problem? Of course you can do that. And their phrase was, and it was a beautiful phrase, we pay you to deliver. We pay you for the job. We will tell you expectations, clarity. This is what you are here to do. And believe you me, if you don't deliver, we will find you and we will fire you. Yeah, and yeah, it's said in a certain way to make you laugh and whatever, but there is truth in that. What are you here for? That's what you're hired for.
Yeah, absolutely.
There might be reasons, there might be extenuating circumstances, and all of those things. Of course there are, and that's all management. But that's the clarity.
Yeah, understood. So I guess just thinking, look, there's lots of different models, aren't there? Lots of hybrid models. Some people are saying everybody's got to come in. Other people are saying some teams have got to come in, other teams don't come in, and they continue to work remotely. Do you think there's a silver bullet here in terms of what that structure should look like, or is it differ by organisation, by team, or so on? What's your take on that?
I think it definitely differs by what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. So it's more than likely absolutely different organisation to organisation, because you're different. You've got different cultures, you've got different people, different needs, different wants, different products, different services. So absolutely at that level. And then you can take that down into microcosms inside the organisation of the different divisions and so forth. But again, that's the interesting thing. Why do you need people in the office, or why don't you? And as I said, I know FS businesses, it's 100% in the office. Fine.
Yep.
That's it. That's what they want. That's what they think makes them operate efficiently and effectively. Brilliant. GitHub's more 100% remote. Brilliant. That's what works for them.
Yeah. Okay. That's really useful. So I think we'll open to questions in a moment, Russell. But is there anything else in terms of kind of real gems that you've got that you think would be useful to share for everybody on the call?
How long we got? I think the one thing we haven't touched on, which could be interesting, is what the employer provides the employee working remotely.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
What equipment do we give? Now, there was research by, I think it was Hubble earlier this year, that said the number one thing remote workers, working from home people want is a decent office chair. I think we've all found over the last 18 months, our dining room chairs aren't quite as comfortable as we thought they were. And there's a reason, actually. We're suddenly realizing why office chairs are 600 quid or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And so forth. So office chairs one. The second one is stand-up desk.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, a stand-up desk doesn't have to be that big 6-foot wide motorized thing. I've got a Harmony, Harmoni. It's 4 pieces of wood. It fits together. It collapses. It's therefore very portable for me. And I can send you a photo if anyone wants it. But I'm standing now at my desk, and so that's good.
Yeah.
But then you get to interesting things. So second screen, do you need to provide a shredder? Confidential waste. Your people, David, might be printing out CVs out. Printers. Do you need to provide a printer for everyone, and therefore ink and paper? But if they're taking CVs home because they printed them in the office or they're printing them out at home, how do they dispose of that? GDPR, data protection, personal information, and so forth. And then, so you may or may not supply all this kit. Who's insuring it? So
you're right. These are things which is, have not even been front of mind before, have they?
So you've got, I don't know, £1,000, £2,000, £5,000, a laptop, and all of this kit at home. Who's suddenly insuring that? Because if someone gets broken into and it all gets nicked, who are you going to be having a chat with? So in all of this, the definition, the strategy dictates things, but it's actually the answers are really quite tactical and granular on things. That's the interesting. Flipping back to benefits, interestingly, a classic benefit for someone living in London would have been an interest-free loan on the rail ticket. Classic benefit. It's been around since I left university, which is far too long ago. So if you do that, how far do you go? Would you do an interest-free loan so someone could have a garden room as an office?
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's going to be interesting to see where this all evolves to. Certainly. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Good. Well, let's see if there's some questions, shall we? We're reaching the last few minutes. So, okay. So one question we've got there, Russell. How do you manage your workforce who cannot work remotely from your actual remote workers? They may feel disadvantaged to not have the opportunity to work from home, which we got earlier, didn't we, with the equity piece? But
and I think that's a really insightful question, really interesting question. There is work that can be done from home. There is work that cannot be done from home. Key workers would have been the classic example of the last period. I think having the clarity is important. And in having the clarity, it gives people choice. Some people don't want to be at home. Absolutely. Some people do. And that's, again, personal choice and marrying it. I think people in the office, ultimately, I think this could come down to how, and David, you touched on it. So people who come into the office 5 days a week, do you need to recognize, reward, compensate in some way? Those who wish to stay at home, are they on less salary? That's an option. Certainly, if someone wants to live in Scotland, fine. Underlying this is, if people want transparency, be careful where transparency goes, because if you as an employee are saying to me as the employer, that job can be done from home, I don't need to come into London 5 days a week, I'm going to work in the Cotswold in Scotland, I'm going to be somewhere 5 days a week. Be careful. As an employee, you need to be careful with that, because if you are genuinely telling me that job can be done remotely, then why does it need to be done in Scotland? In the UK, it could be done in Budapest. It could be done in Mumbai. It could be done anywhere. And then I really can look for skill, at a lower price point. So it's all of this, as with most things in life, there is a flip to a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting dynamic. You're absolutely right. Okay,
And there's another question: are we more efficient at home?
yeah,
I mean, yes and no. Again, there's different studies. It's interesting. I think you can put it into two camps. Pre-pandemic, there were a number of studies, as I said, AstraZeneca, Deloitte, and Corporate Leadership Council, that found that people who were given the flexibility they want were more committed to their work, between 28 and 32% more committed. And you can look at commitment scores, and that correlates and translates into a productivity bounce, and that's about 6.4% productivity bounce. Call centers in India that allowed home working were found that people were who worked from home dealt with more calls, dealt with them, and got better scores, and so forth. Some work can't be done from home. So actually, I think it's, what are you trying to do? Again, interestingly, pre-pandemic, the Gallup State of the American Workplace Survey, I think it was 2019, said actually it's having flexibility in your flexibility that's interesting.
yeah,
Because, and David, you hinted at this, of your customer who was in the office trying to do concentrated work. Maybe that should be done at home. Come into the office for collaboration.
yep,
Focus at home.
yeah,
And actually, they found in that Gallup survey, the most productive people were people who spent broadly 2 days a week at home or in the office, and the other period at home or in the office. So there's that one.
yeah, absolutely.
Implications.
That's a big topic for the last 5 minutes, I'd say. I mean, I think this is one actually we've been looking at quite a lot actually around source right, just because there's clearly a whole piece around borderless talent, which you touched on earlier. I think people don't need to be based in the same country now, but there are a number of tax implications for that in terms of where the value of the work is being added and where the individual sits. So it's definitely a pretty gnarly subject. There are solutions to that, but it really depends on the actual individual setup and so on. But I think it's going to become something that's much more prevalent. So it will be easier to navigate that. But there certainly are solutions around that. I don't know, Russell, if there's anything you've got to add to that. But
I know it's an issue. Interesting, it's playing out in the US at the moment. But New York is companies pay tax based on the workers in the workspace. If the workers aren't in the workspace, they're not paying the tax. And so you've got bankers, Wall Street stuff, who might be not in the metropolis because they live there, so they're not paying tax there, and so on. So that's all kicking off, going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, is it a fair conclusion that it's not a simple solution to say you can work from anywhere? Yeah, absolutely. There's some legislative and tax implications around that, certainly. Well, I'm conscious of time. We're nearly at the top of the hour, so it's been really interesting kind of talking to you about this, Russell. I think it's a hot topic for lots of people, and I think if I can try and summarise, and perhaps you can correct me if I get it wrong, but I think what you're saying to us, look, we've got to where we are organically. Yeah, we did that as a reaction to what was going on, and we had to do that, and that had a fundamental impact in terms of the way that we as a world actually was working. But the time now has come to start thinking a bit more strategically about the way that we move forward with this remote working. And we need to provide some real clarity and some real direction for individuals and organisations around kind of the way that works. And I think the other interesting point that you really made was it's important to have a strategy around that remote working. But the difficulty and the importance is really to get into the real minutiae detail. So you've got to think about it at a broad scale, but also understand exactly what it means for individuals working within individual roles, needing individual tools and so on to get their job done. So it's a big piece of work, but now's the time to take a step back and really kind of take stock of where we are and think about where we want to be. Would that be a fair summation?
Absolutely spot on.
Good stuff. Good. Well, thank you very much for your time, Russell. As always, it's been very interesting chatting with you, and I'm sure we will do another session. But Angelique, was there anything that you'd like to wrap up with?
We will share with you the recording of this session as usual. And if you want to have more information, you can all jump in on our website. You can find all information regarding talent scarcity and remote workforce.
Good stuff. And thank you everybody who's joined us today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Some nice comments there. Thank you very much for that. And we look forward to seeing you on the next session that we run. Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone. Keep safe. Keep well.
Bye.